It is my pleasure to welcome and introduce Alberto Kalach to SCI-Arc once again. I think Alberto was here 3-4 years ago, something like that. Some of us, we had the pleasure last year to be in his office and his building, and in one of the best terraces or rooftop you can ever be in the world. It's a phenomenal place. But I just want to point out to a couple of things that I think are absolutely crucial and personal, I would say, to the context of SCI-Arc. I think Alberto is an extraordinary architect for many, many reasons. But a couple of them have to do with his uniqueness and his idiosyncratic approach to architecture. One thing I was thinking that it was a very interesting idea. I was thinking the notion of anger, and not because Alberto is an angry man. He's not. Actually, he's a very fun and easygoing guy to hang around, if you're not one of his colleagues in the context. But I was thinking in this quote of Aristotle's about that anybody can become angry, that is easy. But to be angry with the right person to the right degree and the right time, and for the right purpose and in the right way, that's not within everybody's power, and it's not easy. I will say that Alberto is an angry architect, but not because he's angry with the world. He's angry because he wants to challenge the status quo, because he's not satisfied with the limits and the confinements sometimes the field and the profession try to define for us. He is, in that sense, a very rebellious figure, and he's somebody who's never at ease with whatever context. And I think this is an important lesson for us here in SCI-Arc, and in particular for the students, about the idea of no compromise, about the idea of to really keep all the time trying to find the north. Today we were talking with him about how to keep that going, how you keep the motivation and so and the desire to produce a work that has a relevance and a substance in a context that sometimes is complete adverse. And this idea of being angry about it and to have that kind of a fire and passion, anger is great because it fuels you with passion. It's the opposite of depression. It's the opposite that sometimes with architects complain all the time. So in that sense, and I'm not sure about to say this because the context of being recorded and so on, but allow me the extension. There is a saying that says that angry young men need to be protected, angry old men need to be killed. In the world of architecture, architects, we are young forever. So I think Alberto is an angry architect who needs to be protected by us, by the discipline, and to be treasured. So please join me to welcome Alberto Kalach, an angry architect.
Thank you very much for being here, and thank you very much to Hernan, not only for the invitation, but the introduction is, I'm an old man and not so angry. Hungry, maybe. No, thank you. Last time that I was here, I was so intimidated by, I'm still are, you know, it's the best school of architecture I have ever seen. I don't know, because there's a seed here. There's something happening here, starting for the fantastic space. I'm going to move a little bit. But the tremendous amount of thought and of work, and I'm starting to see in LA context the results. There are many new buildings that they start to have the germ of SCI-Arc, and that's very exciting. And I'm very pleased, very excited to be here. Of course, by now, I don't have to apologize of my bad English, but we have slides to help. Well, first of all, my practice is based in Mexico City, and I like this map because Mexico City is very close to the equator, and as you can see, is in the center of Africa, the Peninsula Arabica, Mumbai, is in a place, tropical place. But here we have an interesting situation where the oceans are very close together, and Mexico is in a very high altitude. So even though we are in the tropic, in the very hot tropic, because of the altitude, is a temperate weather. It's very similar to Los Angeles, maybe a little bit more mild. And there is a topographic situation where the winds and the humidity, gather here in a very high altitude, 2,000 meters above sea level. That's like 6,000 feet, maybe. So in that weather, very mild weather, we can do many things. We don't need to insulate the buildings. But we should, because in winter it's very cold. We just realized that. But I mean, it's a very, since it's a mild weather and it's a very relaxed society, we can do many things. And we can do experiment. We can experiment with the ways of building and ways of living. So I'm gonna show you a series of projects and ideas, and through those projects, maybe we will find out a line of thought, I hope. I don't have it very clear, but just maybe there is a thought, a philosophy behind these projects. The first one is related to our city. This is Mexico City. This is a photograph of, let's say, 2000. And this is a project that we've been working, well, we stopped, but we worked in this project for 25 years, trying to recover, you see this void in the city. The city was, as you know, a very extended and shallow lake that went from here to there. There is a remaining of the lake, of a big lake, but the lake was going from there to there, like 40 kilometers by, let's say, 10, 15 kilometers. And the city grew on top of that lake. I'm not going to go into details of this catastrophe, but the only part that remained in the 60s, I mean in the 2000 year, was this part of, and we said, well, we could rescue that part of the lake at least, because that's the origin of the city. Of course, the forest, pines and oaks were going all the way down to the lake. So it was like a paradise in the middle of the tropic with very mild weather. But we did this monster, and we tried to, for 25 years, we tried to rescue this area and recover the lake. We knew that there was a possibility to build an airport there. The city, the airport right now is right here in the middle of the city. So we knew that this airport didn't have a chance to grow since 20 years before we needed a new airport. So we said, why we could not have an airport in the middle of the new lake, of the new recovered lake? And I think airports and lakes are compatible because they need a lot of space, and the terminal, the construction is very, very small compared to the space that the aircraft needs to take off and to land. So we worked in this project for 20 years. The position of the airport changed from there to there. But the idea of having a big lake and to having this important infrastructure for the city and for the country was a goal. And of course, more important than the airport was the development of the city all around the lake. So we have like more than 100 kilometers around the lake of organized development. As you know, Latin American cities, they grow spontaneously with no direction. So this was an opportunity to direct the future development of the city around the big lake, with the airport sitting on the middle of the lake. Like 2-3 years ago, there was a competition for the terminal. Of course, we entered to the competition. The competition was a fake competition. The project was given to Sir Norman Foster, which I consider a great architect. But I think to do a good building, you need not only a good architect, but you need a good client. And in this case, the client, Mexican government, as you know, not very well organized and very corrupt, decided to give the project to Norman Foster. And as I said, being a great architect with not a good client, you know, the project is going nowhere. What is happening? That, yes, the terminal is here, a little bit here, in the lowest part of the empty lake. So the terminal will have to pump water permanently. And of course, the connection to the city and the relation to the landscape and the relation to the rest of the city is non-existent, because the client didn't ask Foster to take into consideration the city. So he's designing a fantastic airport, probably the most ambitious, one of the most ambitious projects of his office, but with no connection to the city. So what he's doing, in fact, if you see the Foster scheme is very similar to this one, with a little difference that this one cost 1/5 of what it's going to cost his terminal, and another substantial difference that this thing, which is very simple and rational, can be built on phases, and his project has to be built the whole in one action, because it's like I don't know if you are related to that, but when we work with our airport planners, we told them that we needed a low-cost terminal. And we came to this very easy form. Everything is on one level. We have a very bad soil in that area of the city, very bad soil. So we said, let's do a very, shallow foundations, the very light structures. And there is an invention here that hasn't been done in any airport in the world. As you can remember, if you remember any big airport, the departures, you have the big roof, the big space in the departure area, but in the arrivals, you get, underneath. And the arrivals are like the basement of the building, and the big space is in the departures. So we came to this idea that the departures are, of course, here, the counters and the waiting spaces to go into the airport, into the airplanes. But the arrivals usually are underneath. But here we came with this idea that I still think is very unique and should be built, not by us. The arrivals are also with in a fantastic space, but in between the departures at the ground level. So those are the arrivals, and those are the departures connected with a bridge. So when you go out from the airplane, you can cross through a bridge, and you get to the arrivals, and these are the departures. Very simple scheme, very unique in a way, and of course the possibility of recovering the lake and create the development or the growth of the future city around the lake and the airport. So this is it's a structure, steel structure, light structure, taking north light, protecting, from the south, east, and west, and we thought that there was Mexico has, this huge diversity of vegetation, that we could have the biggest greenhouse in the world, that the airport could be the welcoming of the airport could be like a fantastic botanical garden with all these species. And so this is the arrivals. You never have a arrival space. Always in all the airports, the arrival space is on the basement of the departure space. But here we managed to have this situation. So that's another project. Sorry for the discontinuity of the explanation, the presentation. This is the library. Again, it's a section. The library is the main library in Mexico City. That's the actual situation. The site plan is by a railroad station. This was the plot for the library. It was a very narrow and long plot, so naturally the library had to be that way. We wanted to make a green space around the library because it was in a part of the city where there were no parks, and it was a good opportunity to have a green space for the city. So it was a library and a botanical garden. What's the initial proposal? Of course, we wanted to extend the gardens on top of the railroads. That never happened. But the building, we managed to build that thing. It was a building that had to be built in a very short amount of time. So we did like a very rational and systematic structure. It's not as long as SCI-Arc. Is, let's say, half long of SCI-Arc is 240 meters long, 36 meters wide. The wide was dictated by the most efficient parking lot underneath. So this structure is surrounded by gardens, and we thought that it would be nice to, as the, this idea of the library of the 18th, 19th century of having one space. You remember Boulez, that image of this vault with all the books together. We said we should have a nave, like a cathedral of books. All the books in one space. The books are the main actor of the movie. So we decided to have this long space with the books all in this main space on the big atrium, as we saw in this section. The books are in the center, and the reading rooms on the facades looking to the garden. So that was the main idea, and we tried to find out the way of doing it fast and easy, economic. So the section, as you see, is very simple, catching light from the north and light from the east and west facades, protected, parking lot underneath. So by doing this, we have a very simple scheme, very simple way of building this systematically. In fact, it was built by different contractors, and it was built in a year and a half, 1 year, in 2 months. This section, and some other facilities of the library where we decided to put them aside, like offices and cafeterias, all other things which were not the traditional library were put aside of the building to have this plain, simple building And, you know, in the program was the, you know, they asked for having that the books, the capacity of the storage for books could grow, so we decided to do that like a mechanical piece, like inside this concrete structure. We decided to put the bookshelves hanging in the center of the space, and that could be, you know, like a meccano could be added with more and more storage. The fact is that every day they steal the books, so every day there are less books instead of more books. But part of the idea was that they could steal the books, but the other part of the idea that never happened is that the books have to be replaced, but they don't replace the books. So this is a little bit the context. The context is, you know, Mexico City, chaotic, dynamic, with a lot of lively. The entrance plaza with a lot of trees that, in a way, announce the garden which is around. When you enter, there is a little patio with this hanging structure that we designed. You know, these are like telephone wood posts floating in that space. Since I was a student, I was very, you know, impressed by this tensile structure, so we wanted to do, you know, this doesn't exist anymore because a director of the library decided that it was a little bit dangerous to have those posts floating in the patio, so he put them away. In fact, they are resting there. They didn't even take them out, just they put them down and they are there, no? They are, for 10 years they've been, you know, decaying there. But from there, you turn around and you have this, the nave, this like cathedral of books, where you can see all the building, you can see all the books at once, and you, as a user, you can orientate yourself, and you know, hey, yeah, mathematics is there, philosophy is there. From one point, you can have the complete universum of the library. And of course, even though you can see everything at once, and you can move around freely, there are a lot of, even though the building is transparent, the building has a certain mystery. And you can hide and you can move around. And for me, it's something interesting that everything is the same, but everything is different. And that was like, for us, an achievement. And then the spaces to rest and to read are secluded and they have a different scale. You go out of this main space and you have all this more intimate space for studying and reading and even having views to the garden. So here we have some views, and the gardens around. There were not a single tree in the plot. So for us, this was a big success to accomplish a garden in the middle of Mexico City where there were no gardens. in the back of the plot, there was a power station, abandoned power station that we decided to create a greenhouse. It's still abandoned. After 10 years, they haven't opened to the public. We did it against the will of the client, but still is there. You know, that's beautiful about nature, about plants, that they grow even though you don't want to. They want to cancel this, but this thing is growing by its own. And you see the turbines, and the cranes, and I think this is the best part of the library. And very close to the library, we did an apartment building for a construction company. Construction company was the developer of the project, so we needed to win the competition, so we knew that the jury were engineers, only engineers in the jury. So we did a building for engineers, very rational, very simple, and nothing new. Is a high-rise, so the facade is the structure, the facade and the elevator core, apartments to one side, apartments to the other, and the core at the center. Probably we managed to have a natural light in the central core. That's nice. You know, from here you have a staircase and elevators at the center, but you get to have a very nice natural light at the center. We did like a very classical building with a portico to the avenue, the main avenue in Mexico City. So there's a portico before entering to the lobby, a public space responding to the main avenue of the city. The lobby, which doesn't exist anymore, a new interior designer changed it. A garden on top of the garage, on top of the parking space, which, you know, any piece of green space that we could win for the city, we think is positive. So this is on top of the garage. It's not a green roof, it's a park on top of the roof. That can be done. And, you know, the building is, you know, what was interesting is that you can have an apartment with one window or two windows or three windows, depending on your budget. So it was a free plan, the facade as the structure, so that gives you the possibility of expanding or having different types of apartments. That's part of the, that was a sketch for the garden. That it came out pretty close to the image. And here you see the structure around, and you know, you can have different partitions, the organization of the bathrooms and kitchens, like an hotel. No, you have to be very rational. But I think that a very simple building could have interesting spaces. So everything is movable. Everything is light divisions for these spaces. Here you still can see the structural elements and the divisions. Everything is perfectly divided. And the concentration of pipes and drainage back there. And what I was talking about, the central core of the building has natural light and ventilation, which I think is something that not always happens and is desirable to have natural light in the central core of the building. And at the rooftop, we have another, let's say, the roof garden, which is here. Here you see the organization, and by this slightly shift, you can get a lot of light and ventilation at the central core, and the gardens on the rooftop, a big swimming pool, 25 meters long. And you know, the possibility of making out of the roof one more space for the tenants, and a gym, and fantastic views to the city. Okay, this, I'm going to change to a much smaller building. This is somewhere around here, a small building, I don't know where. I got lost. There. It's right there. It's in front of, let's say, the most important park of the city, Chapultepec Park. So it's one of the first buildings that on this edge of the park. It's a very small plot. It's 250 square meters. The size of the plot and the size of the plan is like 160 meters. Of course, in a very small site, very constricted site, the plan responds a little bit to the geometry of the site. So we try to rationalize this strange figure into a more regular figure. We work with the geometry. The geometry is very important. Architects should know geometry. I shouldn't say that here in SCI-Arc, that you know what I'm talking about. So we did this very simple building that stands on the edges of the site, with two structural walls that not only carry all the loads of the building, but also protect the building from east and west, and open up the views to the park to the north and to the south to catch some sun from the south, which is very beneficial in winter. And the structure is, the theme of the building. As you can see, the structure is, is not only the structure, but is the architecture. It's the entrance. The entrance is once again a garden, and the building is up there. Of course, the building has natural light and ventilation. I'm sure that in Los Angeles or in Mexico City, probably you don't need air condition all year long. Probably very few days you need air condition or heating. If the building is well designed, takes care of the orientation, you don't need mechanical instruments to have a pleasant weather. That's the lobby of the building, which is garden. Underneath the lobby, there is a very small parking lot. That's another thing that we have to get rid of cars. I'm sure that today I was very amazed in central downtown Los Angeles that people is walking. 15 years ago, there were no people walking around downtown. Now, people is walking. I think cities will change. The cars will start to disappear. Maybe not in cities like Los Angeles, but in little areas of the city, they will disappear. Of course, the services, the staircase, elevators, all the mechanical and electrical pipes are, just there. That's let's say the infrastructure of the building is this little core. And the spaces, which are open spaces, is a structure with elevators on the edge and a little bathroom there. And that's it. We have our office in the first floor. That's a shot of our office. And that's the rooftop that Hernan was talking about. And the idea of connecting, this very shallow garden to the big park. This garden is growing in 2 inches of soil, and is something really, 2 inches of soil, and this thing happens. I think it's something that deserves to be explored in many, many buildings. Okay, this is another project. This art gallery. It was a warehouse existing in the same neighborhood. It was even though this structure that is more common to see in California, it's a very strange structure in Mexico City. So even though the structure was collapsing, we decided to redo the structure with some minor changes. We put some reinforcement. We opened a skylight because it was a gallery, not a warehouse. Originally, it was a warehouse. And we put some greenery, and we did some minor interventions. We add a stair. We put hanging gardens there, a connection here. So this is let's say, a transformation, or we recycle a building, and that's something that we like. Day by day, when I started working as an architect, I didn't like to remodel things. I wanted to start by scratch, but I enjoy now to transform things. I think there is a challenge, and it's very, very exciting to transform an ugly place into something not so ugly. So this is a little experiment of how to recycle a building, adding things, and more than adding things, taking things out, because through time, the buildings old buildings start to the additions and more additions a long time destroy the essence of the building. Well, here, this is the peninsula of Yucatan, in the Caribbean Sea, Gulf of Mexico here. Here is another project which is close to that town. It's in this little hacienda, very little building in the middle of the jungle, extinct jungle. I should say this was a heavy jungle that was completely deforested a long time. And we were asked to, to adapt an existing early 19th century hacienda, which is, a tiny little building there, and another little building there, and the rest were like divisions for agriculture and animals, bullpens, and so what we wanted to restore, first to restore nature, preserve the existing walls. Those is existing, but the vegetation came after. Many of the vegetation came after. There were few huge trees. That's the early 19th century hacienda, a very small building, like 200 square meters. But the building in itself is a fantastic lesson of how to adapt to a climate. It's high ceilings protected from direct sunlight and with cross ventilation. And this is, a place where you get to 40 degrees, 40 Celsius degrees, and still the building is comfortable without air condition. There's no air condition. There are 40 degrees Celsius outside, but inside you are in a, reasonable, comfortable space. We added some ponds. There were some water fixtures existing, and of course, all the vegetation that it is restored. There was none of this vegetation in the place. Everything is done. It's like a miracle that all these plants, we brought it, the way that things grow there is amazing. It's just a matter to push a little bit, to give a push, to put a little bit of watering, and put a little bit of care, and you can transform in a matter of months the landscape. The rooftops also with another kind of vegetation. This is a new structure, a wood structure that we built with a swimming pool. Several water features to refresh the buildings. And some of the ruins and existing mega trees there. Another structure this was the house of the, service house for the velador, ¿cómo se dice? For the housekeeper. And it was so nice that they decided to do the guest room instead of the housekeeper. And this is another project. This is a housing, low-cost housing project that we changed some rules of housing in Mexico. There are stupid rules that by changing the rules, you can change the houses and you can change the life of the people. For instance, we said, instead of having very wide streets that were required, we're going to have narrow streets. Instead of having wide fronts, we're going to have narrow fronts. Instead of having detached houses, we're going to have houses wall by wall. And by doing that, we managed to put the double of houses in the same site. They were asking us to put 80 houses in this plot. So we put 180 houses. We put 100 houses more. So by doing that, we lowered the cost of the land, we lowered the cost of the infrastructure. So we could give houses double size of what they were asking. They were asking for houses of 40 meters. We ended with houses of 72 meters, almost double the area for each family, by reconsidering some rules that we could break because there was a client, Carlos Cedillo, open to break the rules. So we break the rules together with the client, and we did this development, which I think is very successful. So here we see the houses. I mean, it's not an invention. It's, as you can see, it's a very simple house, but we did this, of course, generous high ceilings. And in order to break this circulation inside the house and to have a continuous and flowing space, we did like intermediate levels, cross ventilation, very important, green roofs, very important, and big trees. I think this is in a northern part of Mexico. Is Hermosillo. It's desert, is very warm, very harsh weather. But the success was to do narrow streets, profuse vegetation, big trees, instead of wasting the money in wide streets and narrow streets and a lot of trees to create shade, to create a better ambience. The developer also understood the idea, and this is 1 year after completion of the project. I've never seen a low-cost housing development with such a beautiful trees. And this makes the difference between any other. If we go back a little bit, that remaining space became a park, small park, of course. And even though all the houses are the same, we decided that you could change the rooftop, you can change the window style, you can change the color, a little bit of, carrizo, how do you call, for creating a shade for the car. And this possibility of having the cross ventilation, a little garden behind, and even though it's a very small house, you can connect visually all the spaces of the house. There is a bedroom there, the kitchen and dining is back there. And there are these, the doors of the rooms are, you know, the whole house has 350 wide, so the doors to open or close the bedrooms are half the wide of the property. And also by switching, you know, the section, I'm going to go back, sorry. Here you enter through the, let's say, half through the high area, but if you switch the house, you will enter through the back part, so you can have you can have a profile that changes, no? And makes less monotonous the street. Of course, the developer didn't do that. He only did the same all the way around. Okay, I'm not expressing myself very well, right? But we are about to finish. This we did a little piece here. This is an existing building designed by Diego Rivera. You know Diego Rivera, the great painter, also was a great architect, and he did this piece of architecture, Neo-Toltec. Yeah, and he did this incredible, you know, that's the Neo-Toltec pavilion, and he did here a fountain designed to be seen from the airplanes. You know, this guy from the, you know, communist Mexican guy, avant-garde. And so he designed here a fountain to be seen from the airplane. And you know, I saw it once from an aerial photograph and said, that's amazing. But nobody could see it, and this was like ended to be a parking lot for buses. So this area was a parking lot for buses. All this area was a parking lot. So I said, my God, we should rescue this because the fountain is so fantastic. So we did all the gardening around, and we did this solid earth pyramid. Let's say this is the first 21st century pyramid in the world, because there is nothing underneath, because we have seen other pyramids with functions underneath. But here we said, no, only let's store earth, which is very cheap, to push earth there, create a pyramid, and from the top of the pyramid, we can see the fountain that nobody saw before. This is this fantastic, like, you know, like God that fell from the sky, that you cannot see it even, but by doing this, and we restore all the vegetation, you can see this Tlaloc from above. Here you can see this animal, you know, this God. That's it, you know, we create this axis to be able to, playing with the topography of the land, which was very soft. We could change the levels to see and we recreate very, you know, very a garden that needs no gardeners, you know, a very natural garden with some facilities underneath, and ventilation. Well, and this is another, this is a project, sorry for changing like that. We did this in China. It's a structure, it was a house in China. We wanted to do a Chinese house because yeah, we were impressed by China, and they were losing their traditions. We did this like 10, 12 years ago. So we did this wood structure with a Chinese look, with Chinese tiles on the roof, all built on wood, on top of a rice field. This was going to be floating on top of the rice field. Our plot was into the forest, but we didn't want to knock down trees, so we moved the building into the rice field. So it's like a ship floating in the field. Everything is out of wood. A very simple structure. By shifting the straight wood elements, everything is done with, if we go back here, you see the section it's like, how do you say, by shifting the angle of each beam, you get this more organic shape that remains the pagoda somehow. And by doing that, we can have like very open spaces and you know, more you know, shaded spaces, open spaces, by moving, you know, if you see the plan is exactly the same, but by moving the roof, you have more intimate spaces and more public spaces on the tips. So we did this. We never went back. They sent us these few photographs. And a colleague said, I like it very much. Can we use your design for a hotel in the Caribbean? I said, yes, you can use it. And so he did this version, exactly the same, but instead of roof tiles, it has palapa. It has palm leaves. But it was the, let's say, the sailing offices of a complex, and now it's a restaurant. I've never been there, but still, I have these photographs. And well, we are about to finish this another restoration. It's a house, a 19th century house. It was falling apart. It was like a ruin. So we changed the doors, and we did some little changes. We worked on the garden. We put a little door there. We work with what was there and make some new additions to make that ruin livable. So that's the living room and the dining. There was a courtyard, a little courtyard with a huge rose bush, huge. So we wanted to do a homage around the we did a little wood pavilion back in the garden, and another wood structure on top of the existing structure. That's the only addition, few additions to the existing. And of course, the vegetation that always helps, always softens. And to end, I'm going to show you small houses in front of the Pacific Ocean. It's completely, all are built in wood, which is a very 8 columns and a roof. And that is the whole house with a very easy, let's say these houses were built, each house is built in 2 months. 2 months of construction, and then you have a house in front of the ocean, no air condition. The house is perfectly ventilated with natural ventilation. It's all open with screens for the mosquitoes. That's a little bit the landscape, you know, the Pacific, same Pacific coast that you have here, but a little bit more hot. That's the landscape. This is something that I think it was a forest and now is completely destroyed, but we are trying to restore the forest. That's the house, which is built very carefully in the remains of the forest. We didn't want to knock down not a single, not even trees, not a single plant. So the house finds its position in between the bushes and the plants. There is a little twist on the roof. It's a flat roof, but with a little twist, you know, like when you put that piece of lemon on your gin and tonic. It's not the lemon like that. It has a twist. And that twist, it makes the difference, the twist, because it has a character, and also it helps to drain the roof. Instead of doing all these difficult things to drain, with the twist, you can drain the roof. There are the first 2 houses. There are going to be like 40 of these guys. So it has the twist. It has no insulation. The insulation is on top the palm dry leaves, and a little solar panel that makes the house self-sufficient. It's not connected to the infrastructure of the town. It's all solar powered. And as you see, it's a very simple roof. Those columns are, we didn't calculate well, so they were too long, but we got them. And, you know, the workers, all of these workers, they have in the little photo of his cellular phone on his WhatsApp, they have, their work, because these guys never done this before, and they were so proud of doing something different, something new for them. They felt challenged, and they are very happy to do new things. I mean, these guys, they say, what do you think about doing this? And they say, well, we go back home less tired, and we are clean. It's not the same working with cement and concrete that working clean with wood. Here is a tradition, but in Mexico, there's not a tradition of working with wood. So that's a little bit the screens with mosquito screens and the bone of the palm tree. And that's our last few shots. I think so. Oh, no, there is one more. This one. This is, as you know, I don't know who was more influential in the 20th century. It was Mies van der Rohe or Le Corbusier. This is, you remember Domino House of Le Corbusier? Domino House of Le Corbusier is all around the world. So they put some columns and they start to fill in the structure. And we did this little house, this little building in a town that is all like this. Everything is like this, no? And you see, let's say the town is done by this self-construction, but everybody puts the columns, the slabs, and then the filling, depending on the budget, depending on the possibilities. So we did this house, very strange house, because the owner bought 2 small plots with a street in between. So we had a little building here, a little building there. If he wants to go from the bedrooms to the living rooms, he has to cross the street. But yeah, this is a fantastic client, no? As you can see. So that's the plan, 4 columns and a slab. 4 columns and a slab. Staircases. We switch the staircases to do it less monotonous, but it's very simple. So it's our version of the Domino House. That's a little sketch. This is something that we were talking today about, that now you can sketch on top of very basic computer drawings. That's very dynamic. You can move very fast. And that's the result. I like to show this, the context, no? And the house that looks like, like a, Olympic trampoline. Once again, no air condition, it's completely ventilated. The size, I think the proportions are important, how you shape the thing. It's very different to have 1 meter or 2 meters hangover. Hangover? No. Overhang? Well, how do you say? Hangover or overhang? Or none of them make. And the infill, in this case, out of wood. This is the first floor. No finishes, of course. The structure, there's no plaster, no sheetrock, nothing. It's just the structure. It's a little bit like a pagoda, I'm afraid. The rebar handrails, which are fantastic because they are very easy, and he had like a leftover of rebars, so we did all the handrails out of rebars. And the condition of having, and of course the rooftops, the roof gardens, and that's it. Thank you for your patience, and.